King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Merlin the Wizard. Many years ago, there lived in Britain a magician. His name was Merlin. He was an incredible man who knew a lot of wonderful things and could see into the future. One day, while he was standing under a big tree in the middle of the forest, he saw a silver table, on which a strange cup was shining. When the image vanished, a little book fell down from the branches of the tree, and a mysterious voice told Merlin to read the manuscript and cut down the tree. Merlin obeyed, picked up the book, and read it. It was the story of the silver table and the shining cup. This was the Holy Grail which Jesus Christ had used during his Last Supper, and which had been brought to Britain by St. Joseph. Then Merlin cut down the tree and made a round table from the tree trunk, just like the one he had seen, and went to the royal palace. There the king entrusted his son Arthur to the magician, who brought up the child and taught him many wise things. So Arthur grew up to be a brave knight, and after his father's death he became king. Arthur chose Camelot as the capital of his reign, which now we call Winchester, and the bravest knights of the kingdom gathered there about him. One day Merlin said to him, "A man of your nobleness should not be without a wife." Since Arthur was in love with the beautiful and lovely Princess Guinevere, King Leodogran's daughter, he decided to go to the land of Leodogran and try to win her heart. King Arthur and Princess Guinevere. When Arthur reached King Leodogran's lands, he saw that a strong enemy army had surrounded and besieged the castle. From the top of the castle, Guinevere was watching the fight, when suddenly she saw a strange knight ride into the middle of the battle, waving his shining sword. In less than no time, dozens of men were killed or wounded, and the remaining few were crying for mercy. King Leodogran, who had watched the whole scene too, sent for the mysterious knight, and after thanking him for his service, he asked, "What is your name, and how may I repay you, brave knight? Ask for whatever you desire, and your wish will be granted." "Sire," Arthur replied, "I'm Arthur, King of Britain, and I ask of you just one thing, your daughter's hand in marriage." Leodogran was delighted at such a request, so the princess was brought to Canterbury, and the royal wedding was celebrated with a great feast and merrymaking. When King Arthur and Guinevere came to the banqueting hall, Merlin was waiting for them, standing before a round table. There was room for 150 knights, and each seat had the name of each knight written in gold letters. "I lay upon you all the order of the chivalry. You shall honour and obey the king, defend the poor and the weak, fly from treason. You shall not fight for an unjust cause, or you will sit no more at this table," said the magician, and all the knights sat down at the table. Only one seat remained empty. Its caption read, "I am the perilous seat." Nobody was going to sit on that chair for many years to come, and Merlin spoke again. "A day will come when a knight will sit there, and he will be the bravest of you all." Sir Lancelot and the Lake. Lancelot was the son of a king named Ban, who had been defeated by his enemies and driven away from his castle. One day, while riding towards Camelot to ask for King Arthur's protection, King Ban, his queen Elaine, and little Lancelot came to the banks of a river, where, exhausted from the journey, they all fell deeply asleep. During the night, while they were all sleeping soundly, Viviane, the Lady of the Lake, appeared, took the baby prince in her arms, and flew away. She carried the little prince down the river till they reached a beautiful shining lake. There she dived deep into the calm waters and swam to her beautiful palace. The lady raised the child in her magical kingdom, looked after him and brought him up until he became a handsome young man. Then, to complete his education, she left Lancelot to the care of a woodman, who taught him to ride a horse and, most importantly, how to shoot with bow and arrow. One day, while hunting in the forest, Lancelot met some knights, who told him they were King Arthur's knights. After hearing about the story of the Round Table and their bravery, Lancelot went to the Lady of the Lake and told her he wanted to become one of them. The lady gave him a suit of armour made of silver and a magic ring he had to wear in battle. "If you turn your ring upon your finger," she said, "it will make you invisible. If you turn it again, your armour will change colour." And with these words they parted. He set off on horseback and rode for a whole day, till he reached Camelot. On that very day a tournament was held there, and all the brave knights were taking part. Lancelot joined in, and soon enough everybody noticed the courage and valour of the young knight in the silver armour. He seemed to be everywhere, but suddenly disappeared, and a black knight took his place. But then the black knight disappeared too, and a green one came forward. Finally the silver knight appeared again. When the tournament was over, all the spectators shouted for the three knights, but only the silver knight came forward, carrying the shields of all three. Once everybody realised he had been helped by magic, the king himself knighted him on the spot, and gave him the name of Sir Lancelot of the Lake. He was now a knight of the Round Table. Sir Bors and the Shining Cup. Sir Bors was one of the bravest knights of the Round Table. Like the others, he was always in search of the Holy Grail that Joseph had brought over to Britain. One day he was riding along a river when he came in sight of a castle. Sir Bors crossed the stone bridge across the river, but while he was on his way to the castle, he was stopped by a knight who challenged him to a duel. They fought and fought until Sir Bors won, but he decided not to finish him off with his sword, and he mercifully spared his life. Once he crossed the castle gates, the King Pelles immediately welcomed him and praised him for both his bravery and his mercifulness. He took him into the castle and led him to a great hall where there was a big table covered with sweet cakes, rare fruit and silver cups of wine, where together they sat down, ate and drank. Suddenly the candle lights were blown out and the hall became silent. A golden light shone through the darkness, and all that Sir Bors could see was just a beautiful girl, right in the middle of the light, gliding slowly by, holding a shining cup in her pale hands. He did not know if she was an angel or a fairy, but he definitely knew she was not human. King Pelles explained the girl was a fairy, and that the cup was the famous Holy Grail. He then showed Sir Bors his daughter, Princess Elaine, who was carrying a sleeping baby in her arms. The little baby was the child she had conceived with Sir Lancelot. In fact, with the help of a magician, King Pelles had tricked Lancelot into sleeping with his daughter Elaine. Thanks to a magic potion, Elaine had looked like Guinevere, whom Lancelot was deeply in love with. "That little child is Galahad," said the king. "When he grows up, he will become King Arthur's court, and he will sit in the perilous seat." And with these words he took Sir Bors up to the top of the highest tower of the castle, where there was a thick wooden door, which was closed and locked. The king took a heavy golden key out of his pocket, unlocked the door and pushed it wide open. Bright light together with an intense scent of flowers and sweet music filled the air. A round silver table was in the room, just like King Arthur's wooden one, and the shining cup stood right there in the centre. Sir Bors fell on his knees and hid his face in his hands, but when he looked up again, he was on the dark stairs of the tower. "Go back to King Arthur," said King Pelles. "Tell him what you have seen, and tell the knights of the Round Table to wait for the coming of Galahad." And so he did. Sir Galahad and the Holy Grail. One evening, while King Arthur and the knights were having supper at the Round Table, a lady on a white horse rode up to the open doorway and called for Sir Lancelot of the Lake. Lancelot followed her, and they rode away together into the forest. There they met a tall and fair youth of extraordinary beauty. 12 nuns surrounded him, and one of them said, "Sir, we have brought up this boy, but now he is grown to manhood. He is Prince Galahad, come to King Arthur's court to seat in the perilous seat, which has been empty for such a long time." Lancelot took out his sword and knighted him. He wanted to take him to Camelot, but Galahad smiled and shook his head. "No," he said, "it isn't time for me to come yet. I'll come in May when the trees are in blossom. Wait for me at Whitsuntide." So Lancelot rode back alone. Some weeks later, Arthur and his knights found a strange red stone in the middle of a river, with a jewelled sword stuck in it. All the knights tried to pull it out of the stone, but they all failed. When they went back to the palace, they entered the great hall and saw two strange figures standing at the far end of the room. One of them was an old man with a long white beard and a harp in his hand, while the other was a young knight in red armour. He wore a golden belt and a scabbard, but he carried no sword. "Sire," said the old man, "here is a young knight, a descendant of St. Joseph, and through him great glory shall be won for this land of Britain." Sir Lancelot recognised his son Sir Galahad at once, and the young knight took his place in the perilous seat. All stood amazed, for they saw that the words "the perilous seat" were no longer there. But instead there was an inscription in shining gold letters: "This is the seat of the noble Prince Sir Galahad." Then the old man took his harp and played soft music, and as he played, he told the story of Joseph the fisherman and the silver table and the shining cup. That evening, when everybody was sitting around the round table, a sudden crash of thunder was heard. Then came a beam of light into the room, and through the air, covered with a veil, glided what no mortal eye was worthy to look upon, and everybody knew it was the Holy Grail. So Sir Galahad got up and went quietly out of the hall. When he came back, he held the jewelled sword in his hands, the sword that no knight had succeeded in pulling out of the red stone. All the knights understood that this prince was the one who would lead them to the Holy Grail, and that they were all to follow him.